Today's NFHS officiating legend hails from the state of New Mexico and is representing the sport of wrestling. We're excited and thrilled to have Mr. Rusty Davidson joining us today for this next edition of NFHS Officiating Legends. Rusty, thank you for being here with us.
I appreciate you, Dana. I cannot tell you how flattered I am to represent my sport in this context.
Thank you. I know you'll do a fantastic job. I'm looking forward to your answers. So we'll jump right on in. What role did interscholastic sports play in your life growing up?
You know, I think this mirrors the answer that a lot of people would offer up in terms of life's adversity and the mirror that high school sports offers youth. You know, I'm that kid. I was the kid from the broken home. I was the little kid trying to be big. I was all those things. And high school sports didn't offer me stardom, but they offered me a sense of belongingness. And by good fortune, I got to belong to a group that was built of good kids. And I really needed that because good kid was not my natural tendency. You know, so between standing on the sidelines in football and being an okay wrestler and a pretty good rodeo cowboy, it probably saved my life. And most of that's probably between you and me.
That's an exceptional answer. What made you decide to become an official?
I took a dare. And fair warning, a lot of my refereeing stories cross the line between the Olympic styles of freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling and high school and collegiate wrestling in the scholastic styles. But I carried what I shared about my high school experience into my coaching career. And I was that young coach that knew everything about everything all the time. And if you don't believe me, just ask me. And I ran my mouth at a wonderful, wonderful referee named Don Songrove from Denver one night. And jumped up on him and said, you know, my God, Don, that guy on mat 6 is absolutely horrible. I could do a better job than that guy. And this wonderful old man smiled at me and took the whistle from around his neck and hung it over my neck and said, I don't doubt you. Go get him. We wrestled until almost 2 a.m. This was at Metro State in Denver during the spring and summer season. And I did a couple of matches and was thumping my chest and being the ego champion of the world, and tried to walk off the mat to Don. And he said, you know what? I'll be damn, Russ. You were right. You are better than him. Just stay out there. And I ended up refereeing until 2:00 that morning and slept a much more humble young coach. And from that point forward, I discovered that being on the mat as a referee gave me a different perspective, an additional perspective. Instead of being the lawyer that advocates only for my client, I started taking more of an interest in what the law has to offer both clients in a sport context. And truthfully, refereeing made me a far better coach than I deserved to be. And I believe that coaching has made me a far better referee than I deserve to be. And that's how it all started.
I've known you for a long time, and I had no idea that your officiating career began on a dare. That is unbelievable. I really wish more people would accept that challenge when they say, oh, yeah, that person's terrible. I could do a better job. I wish more people would try it out because it's not as easy as it looks. That's for sure. So we know how you got your start. When did you realize that officiating was something that you wanted to really do for your entire life?
In 1982, I was working with a great, fantastic group of New Mexico coaches, led by Scott Evans, who you worked with for a time, and Dan Sparago, and Coach Kelly from Manzano. And I had applied for a position as a coach on our summer high school national team and didn't make the cut. I was the next guy in line. And these guys offered me, and they said, you know what, we don't need any coaches, but it looks better if every state supplies a referee. And you kind of have adopted that role as being the volunteer referee. If you want to make the trip, we'll put you on the bus and you can go referee. And and I met some of my teachers at that tournament, probably the guy that led me to my teachers. And when I got home from that trip, I knew that this would be a lifelong thing for me. But I'm careful to say also that my hooks are that I coach to be a better referee and referee to be a better coach. And there are some of us in the United States, but I work hard at being one of those guys that walks both sides of that imaginary line. And I've adopted the term customer service agent rather than coach or official.
What is the most memorable moment of your officiating career on the mat?
I thought hard about this question when I saw it, and I've got a couple of them. The simple one is that there's a guy named Alexander Karelin who's viewed as being one of the greats in the history of international wrestling. He was 3 times Olympic champion, and I got to raise his hand 5 times, but one of those was actually near his home, way up above the Arctic Circle in Perm, Russia, and it was a magnificent night. The other one that rivals that was another international match. It was called Takedown 1, and it was a match between the old Soviet Union and the United States in Tempe, Arizona, on New Year's Eve, 1988, 1989. And I got to work a match between an NCAA champion named Rico Chiparelli and an eventual world champion named Lukman Jabrilov. He wrestled for the Soviet Union and then for Moldova. And I still watch that film at least once a month, and it gets brought up to me by a decreasing population of older referees that supposedly that was the most exciting 17 seconds of wrestling. And I got to be there, and it was a kick.
And as it relates to officiating, what is your most memorable experience off the mat?
This one almost is embarrassing. It makes me kind of wonder. In 2018, my wife and I, Eva and I got invited to the World Championships in Budapest. And, I have some pretty close friends in officiating that represent different countries. But this one seemed weird, and it was, let us know, your departure dates, and we're going to buy your air tickets, and we're going to furnish your hotel. And I'm like, well, I had retired from international officiating in 2014, and I'm like, well, so what's the deal? And who is now the vice president of the Hungarian Wrestling Federation and an Olympic referee, Peter Basha, answered back to me and said, well, we've invited what the federation, and this is a view, it's not, there's no fact in this, but we've invited what we believe are the top 5 referees in your generation. And that's important there in my generation. There was a Russian, a German, and two Turks and myself. And we just want to feature you during the finals. And, that one's still a little bit hard to live up to. I'm happy that my peers think well of me, but it also comes with a burden of living up to that.
What would you tell a newer official who is about to quit officiating to keep him or her in the game?
Short answer is, if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it. The longer answer is, why did you start doing it? And most referees, I think in any sport, but especially in wrestling, have some kind of background in the sport. And wrestling, we always brag about being the sport that's not just a game. We brag about the pain. We brag about the weight management. We brag about all the adversity in our practice environment. We brag about our respect for opponents, after handshakes and before handshakes. We brag about a lot of stuff. And I think whatever brought you to officiating in our sport, and I think it's fair to say in all sports, is a debt. I talked about my childhood, and I owe wrestling for what I think was saving my life. And paying that back is not supposed to be easy, and it's not supposed to be all chuckles and giggles and hugs. Wrestling got us through some hard things. I think we can go through some hard things as adults, whether young adults or senior adults. I think we can go through some hard things to pay it back. And the fact is that the people that are chirping at you and making it unpleasant could never do what you're doing. And that's what we said to our classmates when we were in high school, is that clearly I'm doing something you can't. And if that carries on into our adulthood, and we're doing something that you can't, I think those are bragging rights.
That was an outstanding answer. I love that. That's a really good perspective, and one that I don't think has come up in many of these answers. So I appreciate that. That was outstanding. How important is it to have mentors as an official? And what words of wisdom do you have for those individuals who serve in the role of a mentor?
I don't mean to just be cocky, although I kind of am, but I'm pretty good, and I'm only as good as my teachers have allowed me to be. I have the best teachers on the planet, everywhere, all the time. And my job is to be a sponge and take what's offered to me. But I think this goes back to that. I hope it's not wrestling specific, but we are wrestlers. We brag about doing things the hard way. I think that when you're done getting better, you're done. If you're not getting better, you're worse, and that comes from the legendary Dan Gable. But being by yourself and trying to do it by yourself is a dead end. And I don't care if you're a 14-year-old freshman in high school or a 22-year-old in the NCAA finals, or an Olympian, or a referee or a coach. There are people out there that know what you know, but can apply it in a better way. And if you're closed to somebody helping you take a step to the left, or helping you rotate your shoulder, or helping you get a better view, then you'll be okay, but you're not going to be who you want to be.
And who was or who were your officiating mentors?
I'm going to name 5 of them. There's a man who passed about a year and a half ago named Mike Matlock. And Matlock was not the best referee in Missouri, the best referee in the United States, the best referee in anywhere. But Matlock could identify the great teachers, and he could identify the needs of students, those of us that were his mentees, and never really taught me a lot except to shut up and listen. But Matlock put me in positions and had enough humility that the great teachers respected his identification of us, and he put several of us alongside the great teachers, and I'm never going to get done thanking him for that. The teachers that really hooked into me pretty hard, there's a guy named Chuck Almeida from Florida, refereed 2 Olympic Games, and Almeida taught me how to get in position without anybody knowing that I was getting in position. There's a guy named Bill Steckline who's still with us. He lives in Philadelphia. Steckline refereed 5 Olympic Games, and I stole everything about what I do with my hands from this man. That everything, every motion, every signal, rotating my points so that grandma in the top bleachers can see whether it's 2 or 3. Steckline taught me how to operate my hands. There's a gentleman named Carl Sturmer from Ohio that I think he refereed every high school state championship Ohio ever had until he retired. I mean, this guy was good. But Sturmer was a freak about motion. And Sturmer taught me how to move my feet and how to move my hips so that getting into position was invisible to the crowd until they knew that I needed to be in position and appreciated me being there. Sturmer taught me my feet. And the last person, and perhaps deserving the most credit, is my son Sterling. And Sterling, who pretty good referee. Sterling did his first national championship at the age of 19. But Sterling, throughout his life, taught me the why. And that goes to the ethical part of being a referee. You do have to come home and answer to your family. You do have to be who you said you were going to be because your kid's watching you. And you do have to choose the people that you associate with and live the kind of life, that allows somebody to be happy that you're a member of their family. And I get to see my son tomorrow morning. And he is still, he's everything I ever wanted to be. It's not really going to happen, but it's something to aspire to.
That's amazing. Is he still refereeing?
He works a little bit in the volunteer capacity. He's a football coach, and he loves football like I love wrestling. He coaches in the Denver metropolitan area, and so he helps out in the wrestling room and does their challenge matches and that sort of thing. But his real love is football, and that's where all of his passion goes. That and his 3-year-old daughter, Taya.
Those are good places to have your passion, that's for sure. So what was a failure that you had in officiating that you look back at and realize that actually helped you long term?
Yeah, I've had a lot of failures. The one that stands out to me was a match between Ed Giese from Illinois and Zeke Jones, who at the time was from Michigan. Zeke Jones is the head coach at Arizona State University now. This was in the national finals in 1996. Zeke won the match. Zeke, national champion, went on to win the Olympic team trials and became a silver medalist in the 1996 games. Towards the end of that match, or probably a minute 10, minute 15 left, there was an action that I scored 2 points for Zeke. And immediately when I scored it, Ed Kesey looked up at me from the bottom, and it was one of those looks that it wasn't scathing, it wasn't pleading, it was just like, did you or did you not? And Zeke won the match by 1 point. And I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was. So, they had the award ceremony, and I waited what I thought was a respectful time. And Ed, sitting all by himself, straps down on the bottom of the bleachers after the medal ceremony, knowing that this was going to handicap him making an Olympic team. There's a message to this, but I took it upon myself to approach Ed, and I told him, Ed, tell me what I missed, because I'm replaying it in my head and I can't figure it out. And he said, Russ, I elbow hooked him. That last two was mine. He should have gotten one for coming back up, but he would have won by 1 point. And actually took the time to take me out on the mat and teach me the technique. Now, I mentioned earlier that I coached to referee and referee to coach. But this guy who was not feeling good at the moment took the time to teach me something. Ed and I are very, very, very close friends to this day. We do coaching clinics together in a variety of environments. And, so speaking to officials from an official, I think the message in that is that I made a lifelong friend by admitting that I made an error and asking a question and wanting to walk my walk, wanting to learn something about what had happened. And that matters. It matters a lot. Being able to say, Coach, I was out of position. I made a mistake there. I can't get it back for you, but I can promise you that I'm working on getting better. And that's what your question stimulated in me as I replay that tape and think about how my life is guided.
What do you find the most rewarding about officiating?
In general, I have to say the relationships, specifically. And if you watch live wrestling or watch wrestling video, you'll see it too. There's a thing, and we see it a lot in high school sports, where we've watched little kids grow up into high school athletes or watched high school athletes grow into college athletes. There's a little touch that certain kids do when you're raising their hand. They'll reach across their body and tap you on the chest. And that touch is probably the most rewarding moment that I've ever felt in refereeing, because it goes to relationship. It goes to, thanks for being part of me growing up. It goes to, I trust you. It goes to, I love you. It goes to, the journey's complete. It goes to so many things. But that touch, I think, is emblematic of so much in our sport. you know, from what you see in comparing all of your sports, wrestlers hug more than any other sport. We are hugging people, whether it be male, whether it be female, whether it be across the gender line, whatever, but wrestlers hug. And that's something that is the most rewarding part of what we do.
What would you say to the fan in a third row of a youth wrestling tournament who is driving younger officials away?
When I first saw that, my gut told me I wouldn't say anything to him that was ethical or legal. But after things calmed down and in a situation where I were invited to speak my mind, I would simply ask a question. You know, whatever age your kid is, I don't know if, you know, I don't know if it's a 7-year-old or a 17-year-old or a 27-year-old. I would ask that parent, do you remember what it was that we promised your kid when you first thought about signing them up for wrestling? And again, not to you know, set us too far apart, but I do find us a little bit different in the wrestling spectrum. One of the first things out of any coach's mouth when a mom or a dad's talking to you about their 5-year-old or their 9-year-old is that what separates us is that we will teach your kid how to deal with adversity. Nothing we do is easy. Nothing we do is fair. And nothing we do is guaranteed. And truth, mom, dad, we just walked our talk. You know, there's something going to happen in your kid's life 20, 30 years from now that they're going to tell their kid about where maybe life wasn't perfect, maybe it wasn't fair. You know, maybe you just got beat. And we honored our commitment to you. We didn't promise you getting hands raised and medal platforms. We promised you a struggle, and your kid just got that. And if that's not good enough for you, then, you know, there's a Walmart down the street and they sell basketballs.
As it relates to officiating, if you could tell your younger self to do something differently, what would that be?
You know, I worked on this one for hours and for days and laying down to go to sleep at night. And I know it sounds cliche, but I wouldn't change a damn thing. I am the luckiest human that you're ever going to encounter. Now, I owe a lot of that to family. I had a strong mom. I have a strong wife. I have a strong son. I owe it to my mentors that we talked about earlier. I owe it to some just plain old luck. I owe it to high school athletes in Grants, New Mexico that made me look smarter than I really am. I was the guy grown up in New Mexico. I never saw the ocean until I was 30 years old. And I've been to 55 countries to referee. And you don't get any luckier than Rusty Davidson is. It just doesn't happen. I wish I could tell you where I would zig instead of zag, but I can't. It's just really cool to be me.
I love that answer. I think it's perfect because I think that all too often, especially in officiating, we do a lot of second guessing ourselves. And I love the fact that unapologetically you love the journey, and that's fantastic because you absolutely should love the journey. So as a final question to you, and this is the one where you're going to help me out. As you know, we have a shortage of officials in all sports across the country. So you have one opportunity to convince people to become officials. What do you tell them?
Snippet, I would say, what do you owe and what do you show? That again, I know it's true in all sports. We are egotistical enough to think that we show it more in wrestling, but we owe a great debt. And I've tried to demonstrate that in my other answers, that we are not who we are. We are what other people make us. And all of us owe something to the sport that got us through, wherever it got us. 15, high school graduation, college, some type of international, whatever it happens to be, wrestling got us what it got us, and we owe it something. So the question becomes, how do you show that? Now at a high school level, I make no bones about it. One of the causes of that shortage you're talking about is that we live in a society, not high school, not college, but we live in a society where all sports believe that coaches are really smart and referees are really dumb. And that's not the way it works. The separation is that as a coach, my task is to advocate for one client and to ethically get whatever my client deserves. And I'm making the courtroom analogy. As a referee, my responsibility doesn't double, it grows exponentially, because I have to take whatever is 100% of a rule, figure out which part of that rule works at this moment and which part is useless. And whatever is left, if I only get 60% of a rule to work with, I got to try to get both clients 30%. And that's a second by second, minute by minute, action by action analysis. Sometimes you get close. Sometimes you get 25-35. But that's the deal, is that if you really owe the sport something, and you are person enough to put your own ass on the line, and do things that are not easy to do and make decisions that sometimes are unpopular, we got a place for you. And I think that's true in all sports. And I think this is pretty idealistic, but I think it's something our society sorely demands, is to find more people that are willing to try to do the right thing than simply sit up in the stands and expect the right thing. And that's the deal.
That's a good way to close this interview. Thank you, Rusty Davidson, from the National Federation and the over 200,000 men and women who officiate all of our sports. We appreciate your time, your wisdom, and your willingness to pay it forward. Legends like you make all of us better, and I know it will be appreciated by everybody who gets to hear all or part of this interview as we roll all of this project out. So Rusty, thank you so much for your time and your friendship over the years personally, and everything that you do for the sport of wrestling, both in New Mexico and across the country. We appreciate you and look forward to getting this out and hearing what everybody has to say about it.
Individually, thanks, and I love you, and collectively, I am so flattered to be thought well of by my peers.
Thank you, Rusty. I love you too, my friend. And